Imagine waking up one morning to a world suddenly frozen. Rivers turned to glass, forests silenced under snow, and the breath of the planet itself hanging still in the icy air. This wasn't a scene from a distant ice world. It happened here, on Earth. Around 12,000 years ago, our planet faced a sudden and mysterious return to glacial cold, an event scientists now call the Younger Dryas that it came without warning. The warming world that had been melting its ancient ice sheets froze again almost overnight. Civilizations that were only beginning to bloom found themselves struggling against a changing, unpredictable Earth. Yet, within this global chill, secrets of resilience, mystery, and cosmic wonder began to unfold. What caused this sudden freeze? Was it a comet from the sky, the collapse of ocean currents, or something far stranger, something we still don't understand? Tonight, we'll drift back in time, to an age when mammoths still roamed frozen plains, when humans huddled around flickering fires, watching snow fall where spring should have bloomed. We'll explore the hidden story of the Earth's sudden frost, the scientists who uncovered its traces, and the unanswered questions that still haunt our planet's ancient memory. So, take a deep breath, let your mind wander through the mist of time. This is the story of the day our Earth stood still, the day it froze. The world had just begun to thaw. For thousands of years, massive sheets of ice had ruled the continents, carving mountains and shaping valleys under their crushing weight. But around 12,000 years ago, something wonderful began to happen. The Earth was finally warming. Rivers returned, forests awakened, and the wind carried the promise of new life across lands that had been silent for ages. Early humans followed herds across green plains that had once been buried in snow, and the planet seemed to breathe again after a long, frozen sleep. Yet, just when warmth had begun to cradle the world, the warmth began to fade at first. No one would have noticed. The nights grew a little longer, the air a little colder, and the rains began to fall less often. The streams that had danced under the spring sun slowed, and the whispers of frost returned to the edges of the forests. It was as if the Earth was hesitating, pausing between seasons, unsure of which direction to take. The animals began to move differently. Birds changed their paths, and the great herds sensed something was shifting in the balance of the world. What came next would not just change the weather, it would reshape the rhythm of life itself. Then, the freeze came swiftly. In a geological heartbeat, warmth vanished. Temperatures across the planet plummeted. Places that had bloomed with green life turned to barren tundra once again. The sky grew pale and heavy with snow, and the wind began to roar through the valleys like a warning from nature itself. The Earth had fallen into an unexpected deep freeze, a sudden and mysterious return to the ice age that scientists would one day call the Younger Dryas. Imagine standing in that time, a human watching the world around you freeze. The crack of ice echoing across frozen lakes, the sun dimming behind clouds of cold dust, and every breath turning into white mist. Fire became survival. Families huddled close, not only against the cold but against the growing uncertainty of what had happened to their once recovering home. The change was not slow or gentle. It was sharp, immediate, and utterly unforgiving. In the stillness of the frozen dawn, humanity faced nature's unpredictability. Yet, even in that silence, there was something hauntingly beautiful. The stars shone brighter in the crisp air. The night sky seemed endless. And in that endlessness, people began to wonder, what had they done to anger the Earth? What great force had taken warmth away from them again? For ancient people, the answers were found in stories, in myths of gods, spirits, or celestial beings who controlled the seasons. But the true reason, the real cause of this global freeze, would remain hidden for millennia. Today, scientists look back at that time and still feel awe. The Younger Dryas wasn't just another cold snap. It was a turning point in Earth's climate history. It lasted about 1,200 years, long enough to change landscapes, redirect rivers, and alter the fate of early human cultures forever. The reason for this sudden freeze remains one of science's greatest mysteries. Some believe a massive comet struck the Earth, throwing dust into the atmosphere and blocking sunlight. Others think it was the collapse of ocean currents, the great conveyor belts that carry warmth around the planet. Whatever the cause, the effect was immediate. The Earth froze again. As the world descended back into cold, glaciers advanced, forests died, and deserts spread where meadows once lay. But life, as it always does, adapted. The people of that time learned to move with the changing world. They followed the herds into new territories, learned to build stronger shelters, and began to understand the delicate balance between survival and the forces of nature. The Younger Dryas tested not only the endurance of the planet but the resilience of humankind. And yet, there was still hope. Even under ice, the seeds of future civilizations waited. Beneath frozen soil, rivers still flowed quietly, hidden from the eyes of those above. The earth was not dying. It was resetting, preparing for something new as the night deepens, and the cold wind brushes softly through your imagination. Picture that moment, when the earth, our living world, seemed to stand still in time. This was not the end, but the beginning of a mystery that would echo through ages. The earth hides its memories well. Buried beneath mountains of snow, trapped in layers of ancient ice, are whispers of the past, silent, delicate, and patient. When scientists first drilled deep into the ice of Greenland and Antarctica, they were not just collecting frozen water. They were uncovering pages from Earth's diary, written one layer at a time. Each thin band of ice carried traces of air, tiny bubbles holding the atmosphere of a world long gone. In those bubbles lay the truth, the signature of a sudden, shocking cold. The Younger Dryas was not just a rumor from geological history. It was a real, measurable event, carved into the very ice of our planet. Imagine the sound of the drill, slowly turning deep into the frozen heart of Greenland. The hum of machinery fades into the soft crackle of ancient air escaping as the cores are lifted to the surface. Scientists hold them carefully, like glass rods of time. Inside, trapped gases reveal temperature changes over tens of thousands of years. And there, clear as a scar, they see the moment warmth stopped. The line between two worlds, one of growing heat and one of sudden frost. This was the fingerprint of the Younger Dryas. A global cold spell, beginning about 12,900 years ago and lasting more than a millennium, before giving way to the stable, gentle climate we know today. But how could such a massive change happen so fast? For centuries, the question lingered. In these frozen clues, researchers began to find more than just cold numbers. They found ash layers, fragments of microscopic minerals, and traces of carbon-rich dust. Some scientists suggested that something from the heavens, perhaps a comet or meteor, had exploded over North America, igniting vast fires, sending smoke and debris into the skies, and plunging the Earth back into cold. Others argued for a quieter culprit, the ocean itself. Our planet's climate depends on great rivers of water beneath the sea, deep currents that move warm and cold waters around the world. One of these, called the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, acts like a conveyor belt carrying heat northward. But near the end of the last ice age, enormous glacial lakes in North America began to melt. Their waters rushed suddenly into the ocean, flooding it with fresh, cold water. That could have stopped the warm currents, cutting off Europe and the northern hemisphere from their heat source. If that happened, the freeze would have come quickly, almost overnight. The ocean had the power to change the world, and it did. Yet, the mystery only deepened. In the soil of ancient sites like Blackwater Draw in New Mexico, and at the bottom of old lakes in Canada, strange black layers of sediment were found, all dating to the beginning of the Younger Dryas. These layers contained tiny glass-like beads called microtectites, formed by intense heat, as if the sky itself had caught fire. That evidence revived the comet theory once more. The Earth might have been struck or brushed by fragments of a cosmic visitor, setting the skies ablaze and turning warmth into winter. But the truth, perhaps, lies somewhere between the stars and the seas. Nature is rarely ruled by one single cause. Sometimes a chain of events, a cosmic impact, melting ice, shifting winds, and oceanic collapse, all work together, shaping a story too complex to blame on one hand. And so, scientists continue to search, layer by layer, for the full tale behind the Earth's great freeze. Meanwhile, humanity's own traces from that time also tell a story. In the Near East, where the world's first farmers were beginning to tame the land, fields turned barren. In Europe, small groups of hunter-gatherers abandoned their homes and moved south to escape the deepening cold. Across the frozen plains of what is now America, the great beasts, mammoths, mastodons, saber-toothed cats, began to vanish. The Younger Dryas marked the twilight of an ancient world, the final breath of the Ice Age giants. But through the hardship, our ancestors endured. They adapted, learned, and waited for the Earth to awaken again. Each clue, each layer of ice, each fossilized seed, each buried tool, tells a fragment of that endurance. And as scientists piece them together, they reveal not only the planet's secrets, but also our own. The Younger Dryas reminds us that we are children of a changing world, survivors of its moods and miracles. Close your eyes and imagine the scene. A small campfire flickers under a sky shimmering with frozen stars. The people sit quietly, wrapped in fur and hope, their breath rising into the night. They do not know the word Younger Dryas. They only know that the seasons have turned against them. Yet, somewhere deep inside, they believe the sun will return, and that belief becomes their strength, and indeed, it would. But before the thaw, before warmth's return, the earth still had more to reveal, more secrets buried in ice and stone. As the night deepens, let us drift deeper into the heart of this frozen. The cold did not ask permission. It crept slowly at first, then swept across the continents with the quiet certainty of a tide returning to shore. Forests that had stretched green and endless began to shrink, their trees locking in frost and whispering in the wind like ghosts of warmer days. Across Europe and Asia, the tundra returned, vast, open, silent. But life, even in its most fragile forms, has a way of enduring. Beneath that frozen sky, the earth still pulsed with determination. The world may have frozen, but it had not fallen silent. Picture a group of early humans, wrapped in hides, moving carefully through snow-dusted plains. The air is thin and sharp, and their breath rises like mist ghosts. Every step crunches softly, breaking the stillness of a sleeping world. They follow the herds, reindeer, bison, woolly mammoths, creatures built for the cold, strong and graceful against the wind. Fire is their ally, flickering in the night, whispering warmth to cold hands and tired faces. These humans are our ancestors, and though the world around them seems cruel, their spirits are fierce. They learn to read the sky, to listen to the wind, to follow patterns of life that hide beneath the snow. The Younger Dryas demanded adaptation, and humanity answered. In some regions, people began building sturdier shelters from stone and bone. They stored food more carefully, hunted with greater precision, and began forming bonds that went beyond survival, bonds of community, of shared endurance. Around the Near East, groups who once wandered began to stay in one place a little longer each year, experimenting with the land, planting seeds, waiting, watching. Though the cold fought them, this patience was the seed of something revolutionary: agriculture. Even in a world of frost, life was inventing hope. In northern lands, the people who would later be called the Magdalenians and the Swiderians roamed across what is now Europe. They carved tools from flint, hunted in packs, and painted in caves, not only for art, but perhaps for comfort. On stone walls, they drew the forms of animals long gone: mammoths, bison, horses, and mysterious symbols that seemed to speak of dreams and fears. Those paintings were more than decoration. They were expressions of survival. Through color and line, they left a record that still whispers across time, a message from one frozen world to another. But it wasn't only humans who adapted. Nature, too, shifted and reshaped itself. The great ice sheets across North America and Eurasia grew once more, stretching their white fingers across valleys and mountains. Sea levels dropped as water locked into glaciers. Winds changed direction, bringing drought to some regions and heavy snows to others. Ecosystems reorganized. Plants, animals, and even microorganisms began a silent migration to survive. Some species vanished forever, unable to withstand the shifting balance. Others, like the caribou, wolves, and hardy pine trees, became masters of endurance. In every flake of falling snow, evolution was at work. Yet, not all was struggle. In the quiet of the cold, beauty lingered. The auroras, those dancing lights of the polar sky, stretched further south, painting the nights with green and violet veils. Ice crystals glittered on branches, and the world glowed in moonlight like a dream half forgotten. For those who lived in it, the earth must have felt both terrifying and magnificent, a living spirit testing their courage while still holding them in awe. And through that long freeze, something profound happened to the human mind. The Younger Dryas was not just a physical trial, it was a spiritual one. Facing uncertainty day after day, people began to imagine forces greater than themselves. The sky became a map of meanings. The stars were no longer just lights. They were stories, protectors, guides, and omens. Around fires, stories grew into legends of a great flood that would one day return, of stars that fell from heaven, of gods who froze and thawed the earth at will. These tales, passed down through generations, would one day echo in the myths of creation found across the world, in Mesopotamia, Egypt, and even among the first peoples of the Americas. The memory of the Younger Dryas lived on not just in ice, but in words, in dreams. Still, the cold pressed on. Year after year, the seasons blurred into one long winter. Crops failed before they even began. The soil hardened, and rivers froze so thick that animals could walk across them. Yet, in small pockets of warmth, along coastlines, near volcanic valleys, and in deep sheltered forests, life clung on. These refuges became sanctuaries, small green hearts beating inside a frozen planet. From these havens, the world would eventually be reborn. When you listen to the silence of the night, you can almost hear echoes of that time. The crackle of fire, the sigh of wind through icy trees, the distant call of something moving across the snow. The Younger Dryas was not just an event, it was a conversation between Earth and life. The planet spoke in frost and storm, and life answered in persistence and hope. As the centuries passed, the people who survived grew wiser. They learned to read nature's signals, the color of the sky, the taste of the air, the movement of animals before a storm. They became storytellers of the land, preserving not only how to survive, but why. For them, the earth was alive, powerful, unpredictable, and sacred, and perhaps, in that deep understanding, humanity grew closer to the heart of nature than ever before. The Younger Dryas tested the limits of endurance, but it also shaped the roots of civilization, of belief, and of respect for the planet's cycles. So now, as you rest, imagine yourself standing with them under that shimmering, icy sky. The stars above you blaze brighter than ever, and the snow reflects their light like a mirror. The world is cold, but alive. You breathe out slowly, and your breath joins the mist of history. Part of the same air that once filled those ancient lungs. As the night grows deeper, the frost thickens, and the story continues, toward the moment when the first signs of warmth begin to return. At first, no one noticed the change. It began in whispers, the faint crackle of melting ice, the soft trickle of water beneath a frozen stream. The air carried a new scent, damp and gentle, like the breath of spring returning after a long dream. Slowly, the chains that bound the earth began to loosen. The Younger Dryas, the long and silent winter that had held the planet captive for more than 1,000 years, was coming to an end. It did not happen in a single season, nor in one lifetime. The thaw crept like dawn, moving softly, carefully, unwilling to startle the world awake. Glaciers began to shrink, inch by inch, their colossal forms retreating toward the poles. Lakes that had been locked beneath ice began to shimmer again under the pale sun. Rivers, once still and glassy, began to move, whispering through valleys as if remembering their own voices. The earth was breathing again, slow, deep, and alive. In the great plains of Europe and North America, the first grasses began to push through the melting snow. Their color was faint at first, pale green against the silver landscape. But where grass grew, animals followed. Reindeer, elk, and bison began to return to their ancient paths. Wolves padded softly behind them, lean and patient. Birds that had vanished for generations came back to sing again. Every sound, every rustle of life, was a small rebellion against the cold. The world was awakening, one heartbeat at a time. For humans, this slow thaw was both a blessing and a revelation. After centuries of adapting to an unforgiving climate, warmth felt like a miracle. The air grew softer on their faces. The rivers ran freer, carrying fish once more. Berries and wild grains began to reappear. For the first time in ages, the people could look ahead and see not just survival, but the possibility of growth. Across the Fertile Crescent, a stretch of land that would one day cradle the first civilizations. The end of the Younger Dryas changed everything. The soil, once hard and frozen, now drank in the rain. Seeds planted in patience began to sprout. People who had once followed the herds started to stay near these fertile patches, tending small gardens, watching plants grow under their care. The first whispers of farming began, quiet, simple, but world-changing. Humanity was learning not just to endure the earth, but to shape it. Elsewhere, in Europe's thawing forests, the melting ice revealed something remarkable. Beneath layers of frost and rock lay the bones of ancient beasts, creatures long vanished. Mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, and enormous elk appeared like ghosts of another time, preserved in the frozen soil. To the people who found them, these remains were both awe-inspiring and terrifying. They spoke of a world older and wilder than anyone could remember. The thaw was revealing history, not written in words, but carved in bone and stone. As the planet warmed, ocean currents began to flow freely again. The great Atlantic conveyor, once stalled by cold, fresh water, roared back to life, carrying heat across the world. Winds shifted, rains returned, and deserts began to shrink. The balance, fragile but vital, was restored. The earth was finding its rhythm once more, but with warmth came change, and with change, challenge. As glaciers melted, sea levels began to rise. Low-lying lands flooded, coastlines redrew themselves, and entire landscapes vanished beneath the waves. In some regions, the people who had lived for generations near rivers and shores were forced to move inland. This migration was slow and scattered, but it shaped the spread of cultures that would later define human history. Some carried seeds, others tools, and others stories. Myths of a great flood, of a sea that rose without warning, of a world transformed by water. Those stories, born in the age of thaw, would echo in legends thousands of years later. In the flood of Gilgamesh, in Noah's Ark, in tales told around campfires from Africa to the Americas, the return of warmth did not erase the memory of the cold. The people who had survived the Younger Dryas carried its lessons deep within their hearts. They had seen how fragile life could be, how quickly the world could change. So they learned to prepare, to plan, to build. They began to settle, to store food, to create systems of cooperation that went beyond family and tribe. These small steps would soon become the foundations of civilization. In the valleys of the Jordan and along the Euphrates, early villages formed, places like Jericho and Göbekli Tepe. Here, stone walls rose where once there were only tents. People built shrines and carved symbols, perhaps in gratitude for the return of warmth, or as a plea that it would never leave again. These were not just structures, they were memories made solid, monuments to survival. Nature, too, celebrated in its own quiet way. The forests spread like green waves across the continents. Flowers painted the meadows. The great predators, lions, bears, and leopards, followed their prey into the returning abundance. The balance of life was delicate, but full. It was a world reborn from frost, and it glowed under the young sun with promise. Yet even in this renewal, the Earth's heartbeat carried a warning. The Younger Dryas had shown how swiftly climate could turn, from warmth to ice, from life to silence. It was a lesson carved into the memory of every living thing. The planet was alive, and its moods were vast. Humanity, for all its strength, was still small within it. But perhaps that realization brought a kind of peace, an understanding that survival meant harmony, not control. When you close your eyes, imagine standing on the edge of one of those new rivers. The air smells of wet earth and green shoots. The sky, once a pale sheet of frost, now glows with color, blue, gold, and the soft white of drifting clouds. You hear the water moving freely again, the songs of birds returning from their long exile. For the first time in centuries, the earth feels kind. The sun touches your face, and in that warmth, you feel the pulse of life itself. The thaw was not only the end of the Younger Dryas, it was the dawn of our world. From those first fields of grain and the rising smoke of settled villages came everything that would follow: cities, art, writing, discovery. All of it born from a moment when the Earth decided to warm once more. And so, the long freeze that had tested humanity's spirit became the foundation of its future. The Earth thawed, but it never forgot. Every river, every breeze, every seed carries the memory of ice, a reminder that even after the coldest night, the dawn will always find its way home. As the story deepens and the warmth spreads, let's move gently into the final chapter to explore what the Younger Dryas left behind, its legacy, its lessons, and how its echoes still shape the world we live in today. The ice may have melted, but its memory never left. Long after the glaciers had receded, the mountains still bore their scars, deep valleys carved by frozen rivers, stones polished smooth by ages of pressure. Even now, when you walk through certain landscapes, you can feel the echo of the Younger Dryas beneath your feet. The shape of the land, the pattern of rivers, the rhythm of seasons, all whisper of that time when Earth stood on the edge of survival. The story of the day the Earth froze is not just buried in ice. It lives quietly within the world we see every day. In laboratories and field stations around the globe, scientists continue to read that frozen script. Each ice core drilled, each layer studied, brings new revelations about our planet's moods. They measure the gases trapped within ancient bubbles, tiny time capsules of air that reveal how fragile the balance truly is. Those bubbles tell of rising and falling temperatures, of sudden shocks and long recoveries. They remind us that climate is not a straight line. It breathes, pulses, and sometimes trembles. And when it does, the world changes with it. What the Younger Dryas taught us is that the Earth can change suddenly. In the span of a few human generations, warmth can turn to ice, oceans can shift their flow, and skies can darken. The planet is not static, it is alive. To our ancestors, this was mystery. To us, it is warning and wonder. We now understand that the same forces that once froze the world still move beneath our feet and above our heads. The currents, the winds, the stars, all parts of a living system that connects us to the deep past. But beyond science, there is something more human that lingers from that frozen age: perspective. The people who lived through the Younger Dryas were not so different from us. They watched the sky, cared for their families, searched for warmth and meaning. They built fires against the dark, just as we light lamps against our own uncertainties. Their courage, though buried under millennia of snow and soil, still glows softly through time. They remind us that even in the coldest night, the will to survive burns bright. The legacy of that time is everywhere. In our myths of floods and creation, in the ancient fear of endless winter, in the quiet awe we feel when the first snow falls. The Younger Dryas left fingerprints in our imagination, shaping how we see nature and ourselves within it. Perhaps that's why winter still stirs something deep inside us, a strange blend of beauty and melancholy, of silence and strength. It is the memory of ice speaking softly through the generations. Today, as we face our own era of change, warming seas, shifting weather, fragile ecosystems, the echoes of the Younger Dryas feel closer than ever. It reminds us that the Earth has always changed, but it also reminds us of our power to adapt. The same resilience that carried our ancestors through the frost lives in us. The lesson is not one of fear, but of harmony. The Earth will move, breathe, and shift as it always has, and our task is not to fight it, but to understand and care for it, to live in rhythm with its heartbeat. When you close your eyes and imagine that ancient world, you can almost feel the weight of its silence. The air was colder, thinner, sharper, yet filled with the same stars that watch over us tonight. The people then looked up at those same constellations, wondering who they were and where they fit within the vastness. The Earth froze, then thawed, and life continued its eternal dance. The story of the Younger Dryas is not a tragedy. It is a reminder that even in darkness, creation continues. Think of how far humanity has come since then, from huddled fires beneath frozen skies to cities glowing like constellations on the ground. Yet the essence remains unchanged. We are still creatures of the Earth, bound by its cycles, nourished by its warmth, and humbled by its power. When the planet breathes, so do we. When it trembles, we listen. The ice may have melted, but its wisdom endures as the world outside grows quiet and the night wraps around you like a soft blanket. Let the echoes of that ancient frost fade gently into your thoughts. Picture the rivers running freely once more, the grass shimmering with dew, the air filled with the scent of renewal. The Younger Dryas has ended, but its spirit flows through every leaf, every breeze, every heartbeat of this living planet. The day the Earth froze was not the end of life. It was proof of its endurance. The ice came, and life waited. The cold deepened, and hope endured. Then, when the time was right, warmth returned, as it always does. This is the rhythm of the Earth, to change, to challenge, to renew. And we are part of that rhythm, carried within it, like notes in an endless song. Breathe slowly. Let your mind wander across those frozen plains, across the ages of ice and fire, of loss and rebirth. The Earth is still telling its story, and we, small, fleeting, but full of wonder, are lucky enough to listen. The day the Earth froze is long gone, but its lesson remains. No matter how cold the night, the sun will rise.